No, I don't want to be on a yacht with 30 people who love NFTs. A tiger avatar with no legs.
It's still a little crazy. You want the whole yacht. And it's a weed company. It's a futuristic world where the currency of power is speed. And in the beginning, people were making $150 for walking down the block. The biggest concert that has ever happened in Fortnite.
I agree 100% with everything you just said. Entering the crypto space can be extremely confusing. And some of the hot areas that people like to buy in are NFTs and Metaverse. But where do they get started? How do they identify good projects? How do they know what to invest in? Well, I sat down with Yossi Hasson from Metaversal, and he explained how beginners should get started in this space, what to look for in a successful community and project, and how you can eventually make money investing in NFTs and the Metaverse.
That's dope.
We had a great presentation from Ranil from Audius. If you guys are not following that platform, it really is one of the more groundbreaking things being built, certainly in the Web3 space. And speaking of Web3, obviously, that's why we're all here to talk about and learn more about what is being built and what is possible. So I have an incredible guest today, and we're going to talk about how to get started really investing in the Metaverse and in NFTs. Yossi Hasson is the CEO of Metaversal. I hear that we travel in very similar circles.
We do. Our co-founder speaks very highly of you, Dan Schmerin, and says you speak faster than anyone else he knows. So I must try and keep up, was his word of advice for me.
Yeah, so his co-founder and I were actually fraternity brothers in college. Or I should say his co-founder's older brother and I, even though he was there as well. I'm a bit older than you guys, unfortunately. So I think we should probably start right from the beginning, right? The question that we're here to answer. How can someone who has heard these buzzwords, Metaverse, NFTs, Web3, doesn't even know what it means, how should they get started if they're interested in potentially investing in the space?
Yeah, so if you've never heard of NFTs, you've never heard of these buzzwords, but it's interesting, and now is a particularly interesting time because the buzzwords have died down and attention has decreased, and that, as an investor, is the opportune time to be paying attention. When everyone else isn't, that should be the time that you're looking at this potentially new game-changing industry. So if you haven't started and you don't know where to start, the simplest would be to go onto a platform like OpenSea in the NFT world. OpenSea is a marketplace that sells NFTs. Anyone can list their NFT on the platform and actually just spend some time watching the activity. What is happening on a day-to-day basis on this platform? Who's buying what? What are they buying? Why are they buying it? And follow that trail of the money. And from there, you'll discover projects that you'll find interesting, and all of them you'll see have some kind of community. They have a path to interacting with the project. That could be over Twitter, normally over something called Discord, which can be a little technical and challenging for some people. And then you can start speaking to the people there. And that's very different to a traditional startup. You see a startup launch and people are talking about it, and the flow of money is normally VCs who have some kind of gated access to these projects. Here you have an open platform that is launching their project to the public, and you have the ability for anyone to really enter into that space, speak to the community, speak to the founders, learn more about it, and then you can make a decision, is this something that you want to buy into? Is this something that you want to invest in? And take the time to learn before you actually dive into that. And it's pretty unique for something in the world of NFTs because traditionally you weren't able to do that.
If you've been following me for the last few months, then you definitely know that I've been trading and investing on Bitget. Now listen, it took me 6 months to decide that they were going to be the sponsor for the newsletter. But once I saw their partnership with Juventus, that they were the world's leading copy trading platform in crypto, and also that they're a top 5 exchange by volume, well, I was sold and I was convinced. And I've been using it ever since to dollar cost average and to invest in Bitcoin. You can also trade there with leverage, but of course, be careful if you're going to do that. And I don't know if you saw the recent news, but they've also done a deal with Lionel Messi.
Bitget, perfect.
Now, you can get up to an $8,000 bonus using my link below. and you can trade spot with absolutely no fees. You also get a 15% discount on trading leverage. Go ahead and sign up right now using the wolfofallstreets.info/Bitget. Claim that huge reward and use the world's best trading platform. How important then is the community that are built around these projects? Because you can obviously have quality art or a product that's incredible, but if nobody's talking about it, it's somewhat irrelevant. And especially in a bear market where those communities have diminished by 80, 90, 95, 99% in activity, how important is it to identify those passionate communities when you're considering an investment?
Yeah, it's pretty much everything right now. NFTs, because it's such a small market, it really is an attention economy. It's something that the communities that manage to gain attention and hold attention are the ones that are able to retain their value. We saw that with, you probably heard of Bored Ape Yacht Club or Yuga Labs. They were able to hold attention for the entire bull market. They were the story of the bull market. And that's why you see them still today trading at $100,000 for a picture of an ape. When you put your head around that, it's still a little crazy. So the strength of the community is core, and the strength of the community is the ultimate foundation of what it will take to build long-term utility in these projects. And the strength of utility doesn't mean numbers. It doesn't mean that it is 50,000 people or 100,000 people, or you go onto Twitter and you see 140,000 followers and the project started a month ago and their Discord has 40,000 people and you're like, wow, there must be a really strong community here. That's probably a negative signal. That's probably they bought these followers, they bought these community members. And then if you just go into the Discord and you just say, GM, good morning, and like, how is everyone doing today? And you get one person responding, then you know there's no real community there. And it's very quick to be able to do that diligence. So you really do have an opportunity to be able to like dive in deep. We are in a slow market. It's a bear market. Things aren't just pumping. So you can take your time to really get to know these projects, know the founders, know the community, and build up your conviction in them before you actually deploy any real dollars into it.
You talk about Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is obviously the greatest example of success in the NFT market, certainly as community. But they also had some built-in utility initially that got people excited. They've added to that roadmap, of course. But I mean, if you owned a $200,000 ape at the time, you effectively got a $200,000 airdrop of ape, right? The token. So you can see the real value. So when you're digging into these communities and digging into these projects, how important is it to understand what the future utility and potential is, if maybe there are going to be things that sort of offset the initial investment that could be valuable in the future?
Yeah, the way we think about it is there's almost three different categories. You have utility-based projects like Bored Ape Yacht Club, where you're betting on the ability for the founders and the community to deliver some form of utility. That could be something like Bored Ape Yacht Club creating experiences with ApeFest and ApeCoin, and they're building out this whole metaverse and this whole experience that they're giving you access to by being an original Bored Ape holder or a mutant holder, etc. So there's this utility world that you can frame. The other is the art world, the ability for a creator to create this new type of art, whether it's generative or one-of-one art or anything along those lines. And the framing in there isn't about the utility, it's about the artist, it's about the story, it's about the impact that this creation will have on the world. And you're seeing some new tremendous artists. If you think of someone like Ferocious, 19-year-old kid today, came into the world as a 17-year-old trans individual who in the traditional world would never be selling in something like Christie's or Sotheby's or get to that type of acclaim in such a short period of time. But he was able to do it through this medium and will become one of the change makers of industry. So you're collecting that individual's art. You don't expect anything further in terms of utility from that individual. Or in the generative art world, someone like Tyler Hobbs creating these new generative algorithms that really are changing how we think about code, how we think about art, and how we think about ownership of these types of assets. So that's in the kind of art bucket. And then the third bucket that we're thinking about is it's kind of a blend of those two, where it is some kind of a new form of business models, membership, and art combined into one. And thinking through what does that dimension look like. And in each one of them, you're thinking about it a little bit differently in what the potential long-term value of these NFTs could be.
You're obviously a believer in the space. You've committed your energy to building here. What exactly are you building at Metaversal? Tell us a bit about the company.
Yeah, Metaversal is a holdco company. So we have two parts to our business. We have a investments venture studio. We work with early stage founders that are building the infrastructure and technology to be able to take the first billion people into the open metaverse. We also invest in the underlying NFTs themselves because we see that as the ownership layer of these digital experiences and these digital worlds, these digital assets. So we have $50 million to deploy in those investments into those founders and into those NFT collections. To date, we've deployed probably about $15 million into infrastructure and NFTs and hold a collection of about 2,500 NFTs from different artists and different communities. And then we have a venture studio that works with new creators that are trying to think through new original ways to leverage the capabilities that we've just discussed in Web3 and bring new stories to life. So we're working with the co-creators of The Hunger Games and other movies like I, Tonya and Kate and Birds of Prey. They came up with an original story called Omega Runner. It's a futuristic world where the currency of power is speed, and there is no kind of warfare mentality. You settle the differences in conflict through racing. And what would a world look like if that was the way that differences were settled? And you have this 21-day ultimate race that the winner of that race wins the power to rule planet Omega. And we're building this entire new story. It's a comic book, it's an NFT, it's an animated series, it's a game, and we're producing that together with them, funding that development, building all the technology while they are the masters of telling story. They're telling the story, and we're bringing all the technology to be able to bring that to life.
That leads into my next question. Obviously, if you're going to invest tens of $millions into a very small and nascent space, especially when we see OpenSea, for example, volumes down 90% and interest and prices, you have to have some sort of long-term thesis, I would imagine, that keeps you driving towards your goals. So what is the metaverse to you? What does it mean? What kind of investments are you looking for? And really just paint a picture of what you think that looks like in 5 years or 10 years. Are we Ready Player One alternate reality, or is it our phone is our metaverse and that's really where we already exist?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. It's this alternative reality where we can plug into in 5 to 10 years' time, and we're already seeing companies like Meta trying to build this type of metaverse experience. First, prototypes of that doesn't look like the kind of space that I would want to spend a lot of time with. But you have other companies like Snap and Google and Apple all working on their own version of augmented reality to really try and elevate this online experience that we've had. We've all seen in the past 2 years how much time we spend on our devices and how much time we're spending on things like online Zoom meetings. And that trend is just going to continue, and it's accelerating. So we're seeing more and more of our lives is digital. More and more of our lives' first interactions are on some kind of digital space, but the experience of them is pretty poor. After a day of Zoom meetings, you probably want to shoot yourself in the head. So what we're looking at is ways that these experiences are being augmented, they're being improved, and they're being enhanced in a way that you couldn't do physically. And you can just look at gaming as an industry to see where the puck is going. You can look at games like Fortnite, and anyone with kids will understand the appeal of it because they're spending all their time in these digital worlds, and it's the biggest social network that exists. People are on there not just to play the game, but to meet up with their buddies, to talk about what's happening in their day, to go to a Travis Scott concert where 14 million people tuned in at the same time. The biggest concert that has ever happened in Fortnite. So these digital worlds are going to become our meeting places. And in those meeting places, the same thing that we have in our physical world, you're going to want to be able to own your experience. You want to own your character. You want to own your identity. You also want to be able to flex who you are as an individual, whether it be with your clothing that you have, your digital sneakers, or anything along those lines. And those are going to become the status items and symbols of the future. So where we are today is, well, we're investing in that infrastructure that we know is coming, that is going to create these open worlds that people are going to be able to come in and out of and spend their time in. And the assets assets that are going to become the iconic assets of that world. We're not there today. Most people don't know what a Bored Ape is, never mind what a digital skin and why I am buying some kind of piece of digital merchandise that could be worth tens of thousands of dollars. But that's where we are today. And as a company like ourselves, we look 10 years ahead and say, well, this is where we should be deploying capital today.
Yeah, it seems like there's two sort of alternating paths. The one you talked about, the Fortnite, perhaps Meta, which are somewhat centralized metaverses. They're walled gardens. You probably can't bring your avatar in from a decentralized platform onto one of those. And it sort of begs the question as to which side will evolve faster, right? I also don't want to live in the Zuckerverse and do Zoom meetings as a tiger avatar with no legs. I already talked to my crazy uncles on Facebook enough. I don't need them screaming at me from an avatar. But it begs the question, gaming itself is so far ahead when it's not blockchain-based. The blockchain-based games aren't really that great. Let's be honest about it, right? So are we looking for the integrations into the games like Fortnite that have already spent hundreds of millions of dollars to see NFTs added to that? Or should we be looking, or maybe it's both, to what's being built on the decentralized side and blockchain-based side and hope that it eventually becomes of the same high quality?
Well, the lens we use is like, we put it around ownership. What enables true ownership? And that's the most interesting 0 to 1 change that blockchain and NFTs have provided. Because Fortnite could tomorrow say you own your skin and you own your character, and you can build a marketplace that people can trade that and already have some of that capability built in. But at any point in time, Fortnite can change the decision of what the value of that item is, whether it exists in this world, and who can take it from this world to another world. And if you're placing significant money into these assets, you want to have assurance that that's not going to happen to you. You're not going to be spending all your time trying to generate some kind of unique asset in one world, and all of a sudden the game developers decide it's no longer valuable and it disappears. You also want to have this mechanism to be able to openly trade that with anyone in the world, and have a global marketplace that can plug into, instead of a singular marketplace like something like a Fortnite. So we take the ownership layer as the core, and we say, what are the assets that have those capabilities built in? And we believe that that's going to be the open metaverse. Fortnite ultimately one day may have to enter into that space because it's so big and that all the user base is there. And by not doing so, people are no longer going to be trading their skins or their emotes on a platform like Fortnite, because there is this no global marketplace. They can't transport that into the next platform. So we think that an open metaverse is going to win ultimately, just like an open internet won, as opposed to we're not using Novell's internet or Citrix's internet, who try to build their own gated internet community, AOL's internet. So we can take a lesson from history and we can push that forward and say the world needs to be open.
Right. And there's been no lack of examples that we've had of sort of these crypto bubbles that pop, but then, the real interest comes in and emerges. NFT summer, DeFi summer the year before that, Metaverse fall, I guess, last year. And during that Metaverse fall period when Meta, Facebook rebranded to Meta, we saw this massive boom in virtual land sales. Right, people paying millions of dollars to live next to Snoop Dogg in the Metaverse, in the sandbox. I haven't looked at the price of land in quite a while, but I would imagine that, like everything else, it's down massively. Is that a reasonable place to invest in the Metaverse, or should people be looking to the assets and the NFTs and otherwise?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Metaversal as a company has not bought any Metaverse land as part of our thesis, because we still haven't wrapped our head around about where's the scarcity. Like in the physical world, you buy property in Manhattan because there is only so much land, and physically proximity matters, location matters. In the Metaverse, you can teleport from one place to another and go from one experience to the next experience, and it doesn't matter where you are physically next to someone else or not. So this idea of digital scarcity in land, intuitively people think, well, if property was valuable, this digital land should be valuable, but we don't necessarily see it that way, and we haven't quite figured out how that translates into real value in these worlds. And will an organization like Sandbox, as an example, truly limit the land that they're able to sell? What happens in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years time when they're thinking, okay, well, we need to create the next $100 million of revenue for our company? Our thesis is they're just going to, provide more land in that type of equation. So unless it's provably scarce, unless there is some kind of thing, something like Bitcoin, where there's 21 million that are ever going to be produced, there's a proof of work algorithm that enables that, so that you can have conviction that someone's not going to just decide one day, actually it's going to be 42 million or 67 or whatever the number is. Unless that exists and comes to the market, we're not land buyers. When that does come, well, that may change the equation, because then there is real digital scarcity. So that's the first side. The other side is that most of these land plays are betting on lots of people eventually coming to the space and starting to build experiences there. And we're starting to see a little bit of that, but haven't seen anyone really be able to capture massive amounts of people and buying on the speculation that this is going to be the next New York City. It's a very, very speculative play, and we think there's much better risk-reward rate investments that you can make today than going into land.
I agree 100% with everything you just said. And then also there's the added wrinkle of having to choose which metaverse is going to have value, right? Not only do you have to choose what land you want to buy and what location in that metaverse, you have to decide if that metaverse is actually going to win. And to your point, we saw this, obviously, this massive bubble and people buying, but we didn't actually see the adoption. We just saw the speculation, right? You as you said, you want to see people coming in and using it. We didn't see people legitimately building out spaces. We see companies talking about it, but nobody's visiting Tiffany in the metaverse right now, right?
There are pockets. So we've seen like Decentral Games generated about $20 million in casino games in Decentraland over the last year and a half. And those numbers are dropping because attention has dropped in the space, but they're still constantly having players in that world. Sandbox has started to create... Somnium Space is starting to host these really interactive experiences, but the numbers are still so minute that to figure out how does that translate into value in landowners, it's still too early to tell.
So for people who are looking to not only invest, but are actually building projects, building NFT projects, considering building something in the metaverse, where should they get started if they have no idea? Because it seems like there's so many options and directions you can go. So many chains you can choose to mint on, so many metaverses you can choose to build in. Where should you get started?
Yeah, it's a question that's probably like, what are you building first, and then there's the right home for that. But if the kind of like blanket rules is there's probably only 3 places to get started. There is a Ethereum-based NFT world that you can build on. There is a Solana-based one, and then there is probably Polygon. Those are probably the 3 main contenders in the open metaverse world. And finding into and plugging into those communities, each one has its on-ramps. Ethereum has multiple different events throughout the year, whether it's DevCon or ETH Denver or any of these Ethereum events that happen. They probably have about 100 that happen throughout the world. And just plugging into one of those would be a great way to start. Solana has the same thing, and so does Polygon. So you can go into the streams of these ecosystems, and they also have real significant money that they're deploying into new builders in the space. So getting close to them would be the first point, I would say. And then there's the marketplaces. Each marketplace is launching its own launchpad. It has its own communities built in, and you can work closely together with them. So whether that is OpenSea or Magic Eden or something like FX Hash, you can go to those marketplaces and work closely to them. That's in the open metaverse world. In the closed metaverse world, you're probably working with something like Unity or one of those platforms, and they have a developer ecosystem that helps people bring new projects to life. And then in terms of funding, companies like Metaversal, like ourselves, we're funding new builders, new founders, new innovation every single day. So come and speak to us on that front. And we also have a on-ramping community called Meta Letters. It's to support new emerging artists to help you mint your first NFT. We have a whole program to support new artists to do that.
Is Metaversal actually spreading out investment over all 3 and beyond Ethereum, Solana, Polygon, or do you guys have a specific winner in mind and a place that you're focusing?
So we have investments across all 3, as well as FX on Tezos on the art world. Majority is still in Ethereum, but we were first into something called DGods on Solana, which is an NFT project that has done pretty well. We just did a big investment in a project called ExoSama, which was a project that was first built on top of, I forgot the name of the chain. but just moved on to Ethereum, and they're building a whole Ethereum-based metaverse experience. And then we have big investments into FX Hash, generative art. We're one of the first investors there. So we look at these chains and see what's new and interesting coming out of them, and which project do we think is going to become the ultimate or the dominant project on these chains.
And obviously you guys have huge investments. You said 2,500 NFTs or more, I believe, by various different artists. Are you also looking at the other utility of NFTs beyond the art world? I think for a lot of people who have been in crypto early, actually, it's kind of surprising that the PFP and cartoon side is what exploded when an NFT can be used to transact any value between two people. Your mortgage, your car title, literally everything in the real world. So are you guys looking at that as well, or are you primarily focused on the art side?
We look across the spectrum. So we invest across the whole industry, and that's part of the reason we set up this the structure that gives us the ability to invest across the entire industry. So some practical examples of that, we invested in a company called Fartech Ventures, and it's a weed company. For those of you who are in the weed industry, you'll know that new strains are in high demand. When a new strain comes out by a kind of well-known strain maker, that compound is in high demand, and it comes out, there's often a lot of fraud around it. It's very hard to know that you're getting the actual new strain that was supposed to be developed, and there's long waiting lists to get it. So what does that look like in the NFT world? Well, you can create an NFT that gives you access to that strain. It can also be completely tracked on the blockchain. So when the strain gets developed and goes into the dispensary, there's a way to show proof of custody of that entire chain. And right now, you aren't able to transact with a credit card for weed-based transactions, but you can acquire that. You can burn your NFT to be able to then get the goods that you're trying to acquire. So that's a completely new way to be able to use something like blockchain technology, NFTs, to be able to solve a problem that's a real world problem in the weed industry. So that's a kind of very different way to think about NFTs. We also invested in a company called PoolSuite. It's a member-based NFT community that is creating the world's most interesting and luxurious experiences, and using NFTs as the mechanism to do that and bring that to life. So we look across the entire spectrum.
Yeah, somebody tried to sell me recently on a fractionalized yacht. I didn't do it.
You want the whole yacht?
No, I don't want to be on a yacht with 30 people who love NFTs. Sorry, for a month. Maybe for a day. That would be really interesting. So, as investors then coming into this space individually, are there ways beyond just buying the NFTs and stuff that you can gain broad-based exposure to any of these things, like an index fund in the legacy markets or anything like that, so that you don't really have to choose the winner? I just think when you hear a lot of this, it requires 24/7, 365 due diligence as an investor to have any understanding of what's happening in this market, or to really do the level of research that you're talking about.
Yep.
So how can someone just gain broad exposure if they're interested in 100%. General?
Yeah, so there's an index called MVI, Metaverse Index. It is a quick on-ramp to be able to get exposure. I think there's about 12 different companies in that index that is all metaverse focused that you're able to acquire. It's a token that you can invest in, and now would actually be a pretty interesting time to do that based on where the market is now. That would be one potential on-ramp for that. The other is there's a platform called Juicebox. Juicebox, it takes the ability for anyone to take a NFT or a group of NFTs and fractionalize it. So you could own some fractions of NFTs. And in that realm, they have created some pools. So there's some pooled NFTs. So you can say, I'm actually buying exposure. This one NFT, this one token that I'm buying is giving you exposure to these 10 different NFTs, and you're going to follow the price movement of those 10 different NFTs. And the last platform is called Niftify. And within there is the ability, you may want to be able to get exposure to the asset class, but you don't necessarily just want to be a passive holder. you can be a capital provider to people who are using their NFTs as collateral. So someone could have a CryptoPunk and say they're willing to pay 12% interest to someone who's willing to give them $30,000 and the CryptoPunk is their collateral, and that loan is for 30 days. And you can choose to be on the other side of that and get exposure to this asset class by being a lender.
I find that a bit terrifying. Using an NFT that can go down 95% in a matter of months as collateral for a loan.
And some people have had that. What we find is that it's for us as long-term holders and collectors of this, we'll take the other side of a CryptoPunk trade as an example any day, because we long-term believers that this will be $1 million asset. So if we can, one, earn some yield on the capital that we hold, we can be on the other side of a liquidity event where we acquire a CryptoPunk as an example. It's a very interesting mechanism for us to be able to both build our collection and generate some yield on our capital.
I would argue that with the NFT and metaverse space and crypto in general, that we kind of have this general UX UI problem where things are just not easy enough to use.
100%.
We don't have that familiarity of what we have in Web 2. I would even argue that we'll know that we've made it when we're not talking about NFTs and blockchain anymore.
Correct.
Right? When it becomes the underlying technology that you don't think about and everything's running on it, and you don't need to explain it to someone. Do you think that that's a realistic goal, something that can happen in the, I don't want to put a timeline on it, but the not so distant future?
Yeah, but when that does happen, the thinking as an investor, the opportunity is diminished. So, one of our thesis, if you want to just, think about it, is where are things technically complex and difficult to do, yet millions of people are still doing it. So if it's so hard to do and it's so complicated and still millions of people are doing it on a day-to-day basis, well, there must be something there. There must be something really big there for that to happen. And I come from a Linux and open source software world, and Linux was far more complicated and difficult to use than something like Windows, but millions and millions of people were building on top of Linux and continuing to do so. So that's a realization that, well, the technical complexity may exist and more people will start to use this, but there's something really unique and novel there, and we should be spending more time, more attention as an investor investing there, because when it does become synonymous and no one's even talking about it, well, then the margin, the asynchronous bet is no longer there.
I think Axie Infinity was the perfect first example of that. Right? Because it was not easy to use. It's not the greatest game in the world, but people found a way because it was an opportunity, right? An average person who is not crypto native in the Philippines who can make more money playing Axie Infinity than at their current job finds a way to open a MetaMask wallet and use the Ronin bridge and do all these things that are completely unfamiliar. If that had been as easy as logging into something in Web 2, just think about how huge that could have been.
It would have been huge. And it would have been a interesting game for people to then be able to play. But that friction is what created the opportunity for those early people who went into that world. And there'll still be an opportunity, like StepIn as another example of a move to earn utility-based, where you buy a pair of virtual sneakers, it tracks how much you move, and if you move a certain amount, you get rewarded with their currency. And in the beginning, people were making $150 for walking down the block, and now they're making $1. They're still making $1. It's not nothing for walking, but that utility, that yield has come down as more and more people come into that world, because those economies need to balance. That money needs to come from somewhere. So the bigger it gets, the more people that come on board, the lower the yield that you'll see.
Do you have any final thoughts here as we conclude for new investors in the space or new people trying to build that we maybe didn't touch on before we conclude?
Well, I come from originally into the world of crypto from the world of Bitcoin in early 2013, and I've seen these peaks and troughs and the kind of attention that comes in and then disappears. And the most interesting time for me is this time, where the attention has disappeared, where we're holding a Web3 Expo conference and there's 30 people in the room rather than 3,000 people in the room, because that's when the most innovative builders are building, finding people that are really here for a long time. And that's also when you should be deploying your capital. And everyone knows the one line, buy low, sell high, but everyone does the opposite. Everyone's buying high and selling low. So my kind of one piece of advice is, if you're here and you're interested, this is the time to have real conviction and to be deploying capital, because if you're a believer in where this market is going to go, this is the time where generational wealth will be created by doing so.
Absolutely great advice, man. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.